Hey, Dave O'Sullivan here, and in this video I want to show you how to have clarity on what the root problem of your patient's problem is in the subjective assessment. And that all goes back to gaining a real clear timeline of the patient's injury history. Because we're going to have two things that's going to happen. Now, as you go through your objective assessment, you're going to have adaptive responses to the pain, which is things that the patient's going to do, which is going to help them be successful. Something like that might actually be inflammation in the acute stages of an injury. Now, here's the thing is the second thing that's usually going to happen is the maladaptive responses. Okay, so Louis Gifford talks about this throughout his books, Aches and Pains. Okay, and I think what we're doing a lot is the new injury, okay, or the injury that the patient has come to you with, it's usually a response from my experience of a maladaptive response on top of a maladaptive response on top of another maladaptive response, and then ultimately the tissue or the part of the body that they are experiencing pain with now is usually actually the good guy. So that's doing a good job for all these other issues, and then eventually they're leading here. Okay, so unless it's a traumatic injury or there's a known mechanism of injury, if the pain has come on gradually, okay, then we need to be thinking about what are the maladaptive responses that the patients had to their previous injuries. So now we go back and we get really clear on the patient's timeline. Okay, so the previous injuries, have you had on any other previous injuries? Now, it's not just good enough to ask, what are your previous injuries? We need to be able to organize those previous injuries into a chronological order and timeline so that we can make sense then of what these maladaptive responses could be. Okay, now once you do that and you lay it out, that's giving you then the best chance to connect the dots and actually see the links. Because if you're just standing here in front of a patient and you're trying to process all this information, that's a lot of information for all of us. So cheat, use your whiteboard, get the timeline on the chronological order and allow your brain to actually see and connect the dots. Okay, so remember, when we have a patient now, it's probably, if there's no mechanism of injury, if there's no acute trauma, it's probably a maladaptive response on top of a maladaptive response. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to say is we don't want to just presume that it's a physical maladaptive response. Okay, if someone's stressed, if they're not sleeping well, okay, then we can have responses to that too. So we want to be thinking about where are the physical stressors, but also where are the emotional stressors that's potentially contributing to this pain experience. When we get all of those, as Louis Gifford says, we put them all into the shopping basket, and then we're just going to attack those one by one to start undoing all of these things. And when you look at it like that, that's where complex pain patients, they become less overwhelming. Because the reality is you're like, okay, where do I start? Well, let's put everything, as Louis Gifford says, into the shopping basket. And now we've got a list of things that we can work on with the patient. Then we, same process again, then we map them out and we identify what does the patient need to be able to do, what do they want to be able to do. And then we start ticking off those boxes so that the patient can feel a difference. They see the wins, they build momentum, and that's the thing that's going to keep them on track until they achieve their dream outcome. Now, if you want some help structuring all of this, just send me a message, or you can just pop a yes please below in the comments and I'll send you some information of how we've helped over 900 therapists all over the world become the go-to physio in your town.